It is day 5,369 today that Boswell has been the number of days we've been in business. Wanted to inform you of that. Let me introduce first, I've said her name once, I'll say it again, our conversationalist for the evening, Patricia Skalka, Wisconsin's own author of the Dave Cubiak Door County Mysteries. She'll be doing some conversationalizing this evening with Annelise Ryan, another beloved Wisconsinite author, best-selling author of many great books, many of them in her Maddie Winston mystery series. Tonight, she's here with the second installment of her new Monster Hunter series. It began with A Death in Door County, and it continues this evening with Death in the Dark Woods. Please give them both a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. Oh, is this, oh, it is working. Thank you all for being here. And Annelise, it's lovely to see you. We
Likewise.
last saw each other last May at Lake Fly, Lake Fly,
Yeah.
up in Oshkosh, which has a beautiful library and other things. I have to just say that this woman sitting next to me traditionally published her first mystery, if I did my homework correctly here, or Google was correct, in 2009. And since then, you have published 14? That is like an astronomical number of books. Plus, prior to that, there were short stories and there was a self-published book, and then there were other books that were published. I couldn't even count all of them. So as someone who also writes, I just have to say, how do you do it?
Well, I have multiple identities, first of all. So, so my real name is Beth Amos. I actually had 3 books published under my real name back in the 1990s, the late 90s. And then under Annelise Ryan, I currently have, as of Tuesday, let's see, 12, 14, 16 books as Annelise Ryan. And then I have another 6-book series under the pseudonym of Allison K. Abbott as well, that takes place in Milwaukee. With the main character is a Milwaukee bar owner. So I'm a little schizophrenic in my writing and a lot of identities. And there's a lot of reasons behind those. My main job has always been a nurse, and I spent the last 20 years as an ER nurse. And so I always tell people that my pseudonyms are because I didn't want my patients to know I spent my spare time thinking up fun ways to kill people. So
Yeah, probably a good idea.
yeah.
Do you have like a separate office for each of these identities and how do you keep things straight?
I'm not writing as Allison Abbott anymore, so that makes it easy. I'm not writing really as Beth Amos anymore. So Annelise Ryan is taken center stage, and she's pretty much owns the building.
Okay.
So
And I just want to say, if you look up all of the books, death comes up in a lot of the titles. It also comes up we probably have enough death between the two of us. We could knock out everybody in this room right now and you wouldn't know it hit you. But it's fun. It's fun.
Well, the nice thing about saving lives as a nurse is that it gives you all these wonderful ideas and knowledge about ways that you can end them. So yeah.
Unfair advantage.
I'll take it.
So tell me, I am very curious. I read the first one, A Death in Door County, and then I read Death in the Dark Woods. And I just have to ask you, how did you ever come up with, how did you know about cryptids, and where did this interest come from? And does anybody here know what a cryptid is? Okay, all right.
Well, let's just see how much you guys do know, because we have some gift bags you may have noticed sitting over here for people who are willing to play a little cryptid trivia. Would anybody like to volunteer to be the first player? Yeah. Pick a number from 1 to 10. 7. Oh, this one's a little tough. I hope you're good with your cryptids. So common to Virginia and West Virginia, this human-shaped creature has enormous bat-like wings and large round eyes that glow red. Richard Gere made a movie about it. Many people reported seeing it just before the collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, leading some to believe that it's a harbinger of impending danger. What is it called? Mothman. Very good. Jeez. Give that gal a round of applause. What color gift bag would you like? And I do have to tell you that one of these is kind of a booby prize. The rest are all kind of cool prizes, I think. So You have to come up and get it. Yeah, they're all kind of different things. You can take what's in there out and show it around if you want to. That I know it's not the booby prize. I know which one's the or I know what color the booby prize is.
So I'm going to pretend I'm Joe McCarthy. I have a list. Some of you don't know who Joe McCarthy is, but some of you probably do. According to this list, which I downloaded this afternoon, there is at least one cryptid for every state in the nation. So I have a list of 50 of them. And it's interesting that obviously some states have more than one because Wisconsin, you've already covered one that's not on this list. But that goes back to the question of where did you get your interest in? I mean, were you like, did you see one?
No. I've always had just a very vivid imagination. And as a kid, we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so I was always the new kid in school. And I learned very quickly that when you're trying to make friends as the new kid in school, that if you make yourself sound more interesting or tell cool stories, it's easier to make friends. My mother called it lying, but basically, I was a storyteller. And I've always been fascinated by the possibilities of things, aliens in space and ghosts and cryptids and all that stuff. And then a certain TV show came out in the 90s, I believe it was, called The X-Files. And it was just like a wet dream for me, I swear. I loved The X-Files. I just loved all the scary possibilities of that. And it's just something that I've always been interested in.
Well, in the first book, it's a Monster Hunter series. So the monster that they are after is supposedly the
Loch Ness
Loch
Monster.
Ness
Well,
Monster
I
in
guess you would have the Lake Michigan
Yeah,
Monster.
well,
Yeah.
Loch Michigan, right?
Loch Michigan, yeah.
I have a question for the audience. How many of you think, whether Loch Michigan or Loch Ness, how many of you actually believe that a Loch Ness Monster exists? How many of you would like to think that a Loch Ness Monster exists? All of us. Okay, we're all in. We're all in. Okay. The second book, Death in the Dark Woods, and if you saw the cover up close, you would see that it is a very different, probably goes in water, but doesn't swim around and disappear into the depths, is a Bigfoot. Why Bigfoot? And you moved it up so the first one takes place in Door County, the Port de Mort, the channel that runs across between Washington Island and the peninsula, all the, terrible currents and everything. This one takes place up near Bayfield. So you've got forest, and you also have Lake Superior and caves and things like that. So tell us why you put it there.
Well, when I first came up with the idea for this series, first of all, it was after I'd spent the year of COVID writing a different kind of book that I thought my agent was really going to love. It wasn't technically a mystery, it's more of a thriller. It was set in Door County, and he was very anxious to read it. Let me know when you're done. Let me know when you're done. Let me know when you're done. And so when I got done, I turned it in, and I waited and waited for him to get back to me. And he said, well, there's some things about it I'm not crazy about. And he mentioned a few. So I edited it, and tweaked it a little, and I sent it back to him again. And he goes, and I'm also not crazy about this and this. And so I edited it some more, and then I sent it into him, and he goes, Beth, I just really don't like this book. I can't sell it. Don't want to sell it. I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. And I was like, great. So while we were on the phone, he said, just let's throw out a few ideas, come up with some things. What do you like? What was your favorite TV show? What sort of things do you like? And so that's how we got onto the X-Files. And bookstores, he said, mysteries that take place in a bookstore at all are always great. So we came up with this idea for this bookstore owner who I put her bookstore in Door County because that's where the book that I just spent a year trying to write had taken place. So I'd already done a lot of research there. And so he said, I can sell this. I have two editors right now I know of at Berkeley. I can sell this. He goes, I'm going to have them talk to you on the phone. So he set up an interview for me over the phone. And this was while I was down in Georgia, packing up my hoarding mother's house to move her up here with me because she had some strokes and stuff. And And so in the middle of all that, I had this phone interview with these editors, and I was describing what I envisioned for the series. And I said, we can travel around the country because there's cryptids all over the country. We can travel around the world if we want. I said, but we can also keep it in Wisconsin for quite a while, because it turns out Wisconsin's kind of creepy and weird, and there's plenty of cryptids here. And so they said, really, like what? And I said, I mentioned the hodag,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and they said, what's a hodag? And then I could hear them clicking on their little computer keys, you know, on the other side of the phone. So they looked that up and they went, oh, that's cool, because they didn't know about that. Anyway, and in Bigfoot, we had been visiting Bayfield, so we were kind of familiar with that area. And they have plenty of Bigfoot sightings up there. And in fact, they also have a big life-size wooden carving of a Bigfoot that travels around town. People move it, and there's like a little unofficial contest going on up there to, you know, where's the Bigfoot this today? We never did find it in any of the times that we've been up there, but we keep going and looking. And then there's also the Shawamigan Forest up there. I'm not going to tell you how many times I had to practice that before I learned how to say it right. And I still can't spell it unless I look. It's a beautiful, lovely place, but it's also pretty creepy. There's some dark and interesting spots in there for campers and such. So, you know, it just seemed like the natural place to go for the second one, because we knew it. And the third book, which I'm working on now, does take place in Rhinelander, so you can probably guess which cryptid that's going to be. Anybody else want to try a cryptid trivia question? Okay. Wait. What number would you, wait a minute. You picked 7. Let's see, we cross out 7. Okay, 1 to 10, but not 7. All right. By the way, you can ask for audience help. The literal translation of this cryptid's name is Big Tooth, and most believe this giant lived in prehistoric times but is now extinct. Yet sightings were reported as late as the 1960s. Fossilized teeth of the creature have been found measuring more than 18 centimeters or 7 inches diagonally. What is its name? What did you say, hon? Nope, that's not right. Anybody want to help her? Anybody else got a guess? There you go, Megalodon. Yes, Megalodon. All right. Applause for him. Gift for you. I feel like you ought to get something too. Yeah, you volunteered. That's the battle right there, is volunteering. What color would you like? The light. I can't even tell. This one? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, I just want to say that according to my official list, the Wisconsin cryptid is the Beast of Bray Road. You know about that
Book
one?
number 4.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, all right, you're on it. All right. How many will there be in Wisconsin?
Well, there's also Devil's Lake.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stories about the Thunderbird.
Mm,
So yeah, we got a few.
okay, and then you can hop across the lake to Michigan because there's something there called
The Dogman.
the Dogman. Yeah, oh, that sounds really scary. And, you know, as I said, there's one in every state. So, you know, oh, in Illinois, it's the Enfield Horror. I have no idea what that is. Well,
Got me on that one. I don't
yeah.
I don't know either.
Anyway, there's a bunch of them. Have you been to the International Cryptid Museum?
There is one? No, I have not.
It's in Maine. I mean, who would think?
Well,
It
that
has-
kind of
well-
makes sense if you've ever been to Maine.
Well,
Good to Maine.
yeah, lots of forests, lots of whatever. It's weird though. It has 2 locations. One is in Portland, Maine, and one is in Bangor, and they give you very explicit directions on how to get there. So next time
Interesting.
you're in Maine, you'll just have to check it out.
I absolutely will.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Now, are you a believer in cryptozoology as a legitimate science or a pseudoscience, as I've seen it referred to?
It is a pseudoscience, basically, but I am somebody who totally embraces what my main character's mother termed as plausible existability, the possibilities that are out there. But I'm also very scientifically oriented. As a nurse, you kind of have to be. I believe in science. I believe in, wearing masks to prevent disease. Don't anybody throw anything at me now. I'm a believer in science, and in order to actually embrace or believe truly that something like a cryptid exists, I would have to see it with my own eyes and see it long enough, well enough, maybe touch it, feel it, smell it, whatever, to, to believe in it. I need proof. So, and my main character is kind of the same way. She believes in it, but she approaches it from a scientific and skeptical position.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that
Well-
part of her is kind of the same as me.
Well, the thing you started talking about, your character had this bookstore, but the bookstore is called Odds and Ends. So the books are only part of the bookstore. The other part of the bookstore contains
The odds.
the odds. Correct.
Yes.
And would you mind sharing what some of those odds are? Because they are pretty
Well,
odd.
Yeah, I think the main one is probably Henry, who is the mummified mascot, the gold gold what's the word for him now? I was gonna say prospector, thank you. I was gonna say gold digger, that's not right. Gold prospector. And it's interesting because I had to research, whether or not you can legally have a human body in
Yeah.
a store or something like that. And it turns out in Wisconsin, you can. I told you, Wisconsin is weird and creepy. It's not against the law to have a body like that propped up in
I
a store.
wondered about
So
that. So, okay.
yeah,
Glad,
some
glad that-
states it is illegal, but it
Yeah,
is not illegal
not-
in Wisconsin.
okay.
So yeah, Wisconsin's the perfect place for cryptids when you consider that. But also just I went to an oddity store in New York City one time, and they had all kinds of creepy stuff like, animal fetuses floating in jars of water and weird pictures and jewelry made out of hair and all kinds of just bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
And it fascinated me. I could spend days in there just looking because it was just jam-packed full of stuff. And I didn't buy anything, but it was fun to look at. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want any of it in my house, I don't think. Although I probably wouldn't mind Henry too much. I don't know. Yes.
Now, how long ago was that? Roughly.
Gosh, probably, it's years ago. It was probably 20 years ago or more.
So for those of you who wonder how writers work, this is what happens. I mean, something that you ran across or saw or heard of 2 decades ago,
Yeah.
that's just sitting in the back of your brain. This happened to me too. It just, you need it at some point and then you pull it out and it's there. Isn't that marvelous?
It is marvelous. I have a fun story I like to tell, I like to share with people because I do have my other mystery series that I've written, or one other mystery series I've written as Annelise Ryan is my Maddie Winston series. And that's featuring a nurse who in Wisconsin who lives in a small town and goes to work for a coroner. And how the idea for that entire series came about was while I was watching an autopsy when I went back to school to get my bachelor's degree. I did an independent study in sociology, and I wanted to look at death and dying and people who work with death and dying on a regular basis because I was working in hospice at the time. And I arranged to spend some time with homicide detectives, funeral workers, who, by the way, really know how to party. Are any funeral workers in here? No. Those guys, they know how to party. Where was I? Hospice, funeral workers, homicide detectives, and then the medical examiner's office. And so when I was watching getting ready to watch my first autopsy, I was kind of nervous because I had been hoping for a normal autopsy, not something that would, be really gross looking or smell really bad. I know what it smells like when you cut somebody open because I'd been in operating rooms and there is kind of for lack of a more delicate term, just sort of a butcher shop smell to the inside of our bodies. We are meat after all. And so I was hoping for something normal. And as it turned out, the first autopsy that came in was a 16-year-old boy who had fallen into the James River. This is when I lived in Virginia. Fallen into the James River 2.5 months before. And the weather had just warmed up enough for his body to surface. So he'd been in the water for a while. The water had been cold. And as it turned out, he was actually pretty well preserved. And it was an interesting process watching the medical examiner go through identifying this young man, both with pictures, newspaper articles about when he'd fallen in because he'd been fishing with his identical twin. The newspaper articles were pinned up on the board. And when he first came in, they went through his pockets of his clothes and they found his wallet and they took opened it up, took everything out of the wallet, including a letter from his girlfriend, which was still legible. They opened it up and laid it out and you could still read it. And it was really very heartrending. And then, they went through this whole process before they actually cut him open. So it was kind of easing me into the whole process. But once they made those incisions and did open him up, like I said, I was very nervous and you get that first whiff and it was that same smell you get in the operating room with just a hint of kind of murky, muddy water on top of it. It wasn't anything bad. And my first thought was, oh, thank God the inside of this dead body doesn't smell all that different from the inside of a live one. And then the writer side of my brain went, holy cow, that's a great first line for a book. And it literally is the first line of the first book in the Maddie Winston series. And the entire idea for that series came about just from that one thought, just boom. And that turned into a 12-book series with a 2-book spinoff series. So yeah, it's amazing how the brain works sometimes.
Yeah, it gives you a little presence. I'm going to ask a writerly question. Are you a pantser or a plotter? For those who are not familiar with the terms, a pantser is someone who writes literally by the seat of their pants, gets a great idea for a first sentence and just sits down and writes the book. Some people can do that. Other people plot it out step by step by step and know everything that's going to happen. And some people fall in between. So curious, where do you fall on this
Definitely in between.
in between?
Yeah, I mean, with working with publishers now, I mean, I have the ability to turn in a synopsis and get money. So I don't have to actually write the whole book before they pay me some of the money. So because of that, I've learned how to outline and think through the main parts of a book, the story. But my synopsis is usually just the high points, the main plot, some of the main characters. And then when I sit down to start writing it, and I almost never go back to that until I get to that middle portion where you tend to get stuck sometimes, I'll go back and look at it again and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I had that idea too, to help me along. But otherwise, I really don't look at that synopsis and I let the book take me where it's going to go. And a lot of times the finished product doesn't really resemble that synopsis a whole lot. The killer is almost never the same person as it was in the synopsis, which I find interesting. I've learned to trust my gut because I've found that when I write these books, I get like 3/4 of the way through thinking the whole time that so-and-so is the killer. And then I realize 3/4 of the way through, no, it's not that person. It's this person. That's much better.
Mm.
And so then I go back to the beginning to put clues in so that it's fair to you readers and realize that the clues are already there. So some subconscious part of my brain knew all along who the killer really was.
Did that happen with Death in the Dark Woods?
It did actually. Yes. Yes.
You're not going to tell me who you originally had.
No.
No,
No. No.
we're not going to share that
Actually,
with
the
anybody.
person that was originally going to be the killer isn't even in the book.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that
so,
is, yeah, no,
yeah.
that's different. And what kind of research do you do for these books?
way too much.
Way too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love going down Google rabbit holes. I love research. I love facts. I like trying to keep things honest and true. Excuse me. And I had spent a lot of time, like I said, in Door County doing research for the other book that I didn't get to write. Oh, I got tickle here. All right. Anyway, so that's not gonna work. Here, do a question.
Okay, who would like to be the third? In the back, yes. Could you pick a number, please? Number 3, okay. Belief in this creature goes back thousands of years and is known across the globe. Traditionally, it is a white horse with a single horn in the center of its forehead. What is it called? Oh, yeah, well, I mean. Okay, so we have a number of different colors of the bags, so you can pick one and come up and get it. A purple one, okay.
There was somebody over here that, who had volunteered? Was it you? Give her one. She
Okay.
volunteered earlier.
Oh, okay, sorry. What number would you like? 4. A common subject on picture postcards, this icon of the American West is usually described as a rabbit with horns. Yes. Oh my gosh, we have two
People are good.
winners in a row. So you may come up and also pick a color. I have to cross this out so we don't do them again. 3, 4. Okay. Are we ready for another one or are you? All right, I have a question. I asked a question about the Loch Ness Monster before. I have a question about my other favorite cryptid. How many of you believe, this is a two-part question. So how many of you believe that there is something called a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or a Yeti? And all of those, I think, kind of apply to the same type of creature. So how many of you believe that this actually does exist? Whoa, we can do a DNA study. So no, come on, show of hands. Okay, not as many as the Loch Nessie thing. How many of you would like to think it exists? Not me. I don't want to run into one of those things. The Loch Ness Monster is fine because it's out there. It's not going to hurt me, you know? I can stand on the shore and I can look at it and take a picture and say, hi, Nessie.
But have you seen Harry and the Hendersons?
No.
Oh, now see, if you'd seen the movie Harry and the Hendersons, you'd want there to be a Bigfoot.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe
How
I'll
many
have
of
to
you
change
guys
my
have seen
mind.
Harry and the Hendersons? Yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah, you should watch it. Put it
Okay.
on your list.
All right, I will.
All right.
It's on my list. So we were talking about research. I asked you what kind of research. You said you did a lot,
Yes.
but can you specifically mention some of the people, like for this book, for example, who would you have talked to get specific kinds of information?
Well, in the town that I live in, Stoughton, they have a night out thing every year that involves the police and EMS, and they bring in the medvac helicopters and fire engines, and they cook hot dogs, and it's this whole kind of citywide picnic thing that they have. And I went to that a couple years ago, and ended up talking to one of the rangers or wardens, DNR wardens there. And I already had the idea for this book, and I told them that I needed a contact of somebody up in the Bayfield area. And so he said, well, I got the perfect person for you. So he gave me a name of another warden that lived and worked up there. And she turned out to be an absolute generous font of knowledge. I mean, that woman answered every email I ever sent her in great detail, gave me all kinds of information. I was never able to meet her person to person, because when we were up there, she was either tied up out of town somewhere or on vacation, but she was an amazing amount of help for me. And the Stoughton Police Department, it's a little town, it's a little police department, but they have their little community, what did they call it? The police the Citizens Academy, that's
Yeah.
what it was, Citizens Academy. And we went for like 8 weeks and learned about, how they pull people over, how they test for drugs and alcohol. We got to go to a gun shop and learn gun safety and then shoot the guns. We got to take the police cars on a racetrack and drive them around. Yeah. We got to
With the siren,
investigate
with the
crime.
sirens on?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, and
cool.
lights and sirens. We got to play around with pulling somebody over and knowing how you approach the car and how you're supposed to do all that. I mean, it was just invaluable information for me on how police work, particularly in small towns, because there are no big cities in that part of Wisconsin or in Door County for that matter. So it's a lot of fun doing that, kind of living a different life for a little while, getting to see how the other half lives, or however we want to put it. But most people are very willing to share their knowledge. They like talking about what they do and showing you how they do it. So it's pretty easy to get that kind of help. And it's the fun side of being a writer. I know I know a little bit about a whole lot of things, I guess I should say. I mean, I've done so much investigating into different things in different areas that, I'm pretty good at Trivial Pursuit most of the time.
But that makes it fun. I mean, you learn something new and yeah, you broaden your knowledge base and yeah, you're great at parties then because you can say, oh, by the way, did you know that?
That
We have
started
a
young.
question.
It's a Google rabbit hole, number one. that's how I got started. And then I actually talked to somebody emailed, I shouldn't say talked to, emailed somebody from the Geological Survey, something or other. I can't even remember now what the name of the people are that do that stuff, but all their reports and stuff are online. You can find that stuff online if you dig deep enough. And I've wasted many a day digging. So it's easy to do. I'll sit down and think I'm going to get some writing done. And the next thing I know, the whole day's shot. And all I've done is go into Google and look stuff up. So it's fun, but
Yeah, but you're storing all kinds of valuable information that you'll use someday. Speaking of sitting down and writing, do you have a goal each day? Do you have a process?
not really. That's my seat of the pants part of it, I guess. I've learned I used to have more of a process than I do now because for a few years I was writing 2 books a year and I had to be really organized and really, determined, to sit down and get the writing done. I thought retirement would give me all kinds of extra time. It's actually turned out not to be that way because I inherited, as I mentioned earlier, my mother and her care. So that's kind of tied up a lot of my time. So I've learned because of that and other things that have gone on that I really can't. I try to plan writing times, but I've learned that I have to be flexible. And working as an ER nurse, that's certainly something that's an ability that
Yeah.
I honed pretty well. You have to go with the flow and take whatever comes. So
But you have a deadline for your publisher. They want
I
the
do.
manuscript by a
I do.
certain point in time. Yeah.
I do. And I'm just anal enough to, can I say that in public? Anal? I'm just anal enough to know that I'll get it done. I'll get it done. The only time I ever missed a deadline, it just drove me crazy. It makes me very edgy and nervous.
Mm.
So a little bit OCD that way.
Well, then your publishers will love you because there are plenty of the writers out there who miss deadlines all the time.
I know.
We had one question. Are there other questions before we continue on with maybe another quiz?
Okay.
I love these quizzes.
Who wants to be the next victim here? Okay. Let's see. You can do 1, 5, 6, 8, 9, or 10. Okay. This sea monster was once considered the bane of sailors in every ocean, but was most often reported in the waters off Norway, Greenland, and Iceland. It was big in Norse mythology. Some believe these sightings are actually a giant squid. What is it called? Yes, the Kraken. Very good. All right.
I think you all
Pick a name.
studied before you came. That's what I think happened.
There's a lot of us weirdos out there that like this stuff. Anybody else want to
Very
try one?
cool.
Okay. We should just give you one anyway, since you already answered a question. Born in North American indigenous peoples mythology, some still claim to this day to have seen this giant condor-like bird swooping over the countryside. It is rumored to be a supernatural being of power and strength, and it is thought that lightning flashes from its beak and thunder is created from the flapping of its wings. What is it called? Yes, the Thunderbird. All right. Give that man an applause here, since he's answered 2 of them now.
All right, Annelise, there is a question I do want to ask you about writing, and this is not about the process of writing, but the finished product. Now, you have an amateur detective in a sense, Morgan is not she's not an official law enforcement person. So there's certain, so that kind of makes it sound like a cozy, because that's kind of the basic definition of a cozy. Those are the, but usually in a cozy, oh goodness, there's a body in the library. There's not, the murder is done with, and you've got some graphic violence in yours in the description. So that makes it like not a cozy. And so in your way of thinking, do you have an idea? Do you put your books in any one of these categories that booksellers and critics and readers like to think of?
I do not think I write cozies. I have been slotted as a cozy author by previous publishers. And the current publisher, I think, knows I'm sort of sitting on the line between cozy and not cozy. But I've always had some graphic information, blood and gore kind of stuff. And the Maddie Winston series was marketed as a cozy, but she goes to work for a coroner. They're cutting people open. There's autopsies. I mean, there's, blood and guts on the page at times. You're not allowed to have sex in a cozy, and there's no sex in my books, but there's sexual innuendo. You're not allowed to cuss in your books if they're cozies, and my characters all cuss because I cuss like a sailor. So it just comes out, it flows onto the page. So I've never really felt like I am a cozy author, and I was kind of, I'll be honest, I kind of cringed a little when I saw the earlier covers for my Maddie Winston books because they were very definitely slotted into that cozy genre because they were kittens and puppies on the covers
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so they eventually moved me into much prettier and less cozy type of covers for that series, but it took them like 5 or 6 books to do it. And then the covers for these, I don't think really fit
No,
cozy.
well, no,
I
this
I
is
don't think
definitely-
these fit cozy.
This is definitely not cozy. It's
Yes, and
dark. and it's-
I do love this cover.
Yeah.
I think this cover is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I wasn't crazy about the first cover, to be honest. The Death in Door County cover. I don't know. Everybody kept telling
Yeah.
me it was a great cover, so I said, okay, I'll believe the group, but it wasn't my favorite. This one I love.
Do you have much say in your covers? About-
Well, what they, they should, they like you to think you have a say, basically. They send it to you in an email. Take a look at this. Let us know what you think. And if you tell them you hate it, they're going to do it anyway. So, I've learned that the hard way. I'm going to detour just a little bit because I want to know what you got in your bag. Because I think you might have gotten the booby prize. You did. Your very own cryptid.
But it's a cute booby prize.
I think you should get another bag just to make up for that, because that one was the booby prize. And you did answer 2 questions. So if you want to come and get another bag, you can. Okay, sorry for the detour.
Oh, I think there was another question. Oh,
You want to do one? Okay. Let's see, wait a minute, I didn't mark off the Thunderbird or the Kraken. So what do we got left? 1, 5, 6, and 10. Okay, this is one of the tough ones. Thought to be extinct for 65 million years, this cryptid was caught off the coast of South Africa in 1938. It can reach up to 1.8 meters in length and 95 kilograms in weight. It gives birth to a maximum of only 5 live young at a time and lives in deep waters. In 1989, it was added to the endangered species list. What is it called? Coelacanth. Very good, sir. The coelacanth. And this is why I think plausible existability is such a great thing, because this particular fish was assumed to be extinct for millions of years, and then suddenly one surfaced. And that's why I think Loch Ness is one of the more likely cryptids to exist, because we do have water. Lake Superior is hundreds of feet deep in many places, and it's so cold that when anything dies in it, people, animals, whatever, they tend to sink and not ever come back up again. So anybody that makes it down to the bottom of Lake Superior is going to find some creepy stuff, I think.
yeah.
But that's where a creature could exist that lives in the depths and only comes up once in a while, maybe for food under special occasions or to breed or something like that. That's why I think Loch Ness is the most likely cryptid to actually exist.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's interesting because that is the one, when you said it was discovered, that immediately put it in a different category from all of the other ones that we're talking about. Fun factoid, this is about Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan contains glacial water. Now, how anyone figured that out? I have this theory about how it was figured out, but I read this in a reputable science journal that when I was doing research, and I thought, well, how do they know that? Well, I think they do it would have to be by a process of evaporation. How much would it have evaporated and whatever? So there has to be something left. Otherwise, I have no idea. They don't go down into the middle. I mean, they are measuring things all over the place in the lake. But how you would know that, this particular cup or liter or whatever they're pulling up is glacial, I don't know. But I thought I was fascinated by that. So which adds to your theory that anything can be down there, that this is, these lakes are very deep and some of them have caves and there's, all kinds of cool stuff.
Caves and tunnels. There are tunnels that
Tunnels.
connect, like in Loch Ness, there are tunnels that connect Loch Ness to the ocean, actually underground, underwater tunnels. So who's to say that there isn't a creature that lives down in the depths of the ocean that sometimes goes through those tunnels, visits Loch Ness because they like the freshwater fish,
Right.
and then they go back down to the water. So the
Right.
possibilities exist, you
Yeah.
know, it can
And
happen.
I am absolutely convinced that if I ever go to Scotland and I go to Loch Ness, it's going to show up.
Yeah. We went to Scotland and we
It
took a
didn't.
boat out on Loch Ness and damn thing didn't show up. So yeah.
Well, all right.
Yeah, no, we looked. We kept, they had the boat had sonar, you know, kept looking. And every little blip there was, I was like, what was that? What was that? What was that? It wasn't Loch Ness. Anyway. Anybody else wanna? Okay, let's see, we got 6. Okay. Well, speaking of which, I almost mentioned this when I was talking about Loch Ness. This Nessie type creature has allegedly been sighted hundreds of times in New York's Lake Champlain. What is it called? Lake Champlain, if you want to pronounce it wrong. Like Champlain, Champlain, Champ, hey, very good. Yes, and Lake Champlain is also like 400 feet deep in its deepest spots, and there are underground tunnels that connect it also to the Atlantic Ocean and to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So, yeah, interesting. Looks like
There
we
are
got
more
2 left
tunnels
here.
in this world than I knew of. I mean, wait, a tunnel from Lake Champlain to the ocean, that's quite a distance, isn't it? I'm thinking my geography is my geography that.
But they're
goofy?
underground tunnels. Well, New York has, coastal land, and Vermont, Lake Champlain borders between Vermont and New York. And so it's really not that far because
Okay.
Vermont and, what's that other skinny one? New Hampshire are
New
pretty,
Hampshire.
pretty, slender little states.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Well,
but yeah, it's actually further to the St. Lawrence Seaway than it is to the
yeah,
ocean.
because it has to go north. Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Wow. That's so cool.
We only have 1 bag left and there's 2 choices. Anybody want to go for the last bag? All right. You want 5 or 10? Sure about that? Okay. Okay. Canada has its own version of the Loch Ness Monster. It is reported to live in Okanagan Lake in British Columbia. One sighting in 1926 was witnessed by the occupants of 30 vehicles. It was featured on a Canadian postage stamp in 1990, and another name given to this creature is Nataka, which means lake demon. What is its name? Very good. All
Whoa.
right. I'm impressed you knew that.
Can you repeat that a little louder so everyone else can hear that? Ogo.
It's fun to
Ogo.
say Ogopogo.
Oh, yeah, that is totally.
Yes,
cool.
Ogopogo. I used to live out in Washington State, so we're pretty familiar actually with Ogopogo and Okanagan Lake. We'll just do this last question in general to see if anybody knows the answer. This creature is often described as reptile-like with greenish skin and quills on its back. It is believed to suck the blood of livestock and smaller animals. Its name literally means goat sucker. Sightings of this cryptid are most common in Puerto Rico and Mexico. What is it called? Oh, look at that. They all knew. Chupacabra. Okay. You guys are good. I got give you an applause.
I think it's time to open up for questions.
Yes.
Said or email that female warden up in the Bayfield area. Did she have any stories that she's heard from campers?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm a
yes.
big camper ignorance. So I want to know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
What's out.
Yes, she did. And she actually grew up on one of the reservations up there. So she's familiar with a lot of the Native American legends and stuff too, related to Bigfoot. I mean, Bigfoot is not something new, really. I mean, there's legends of giant ape-like men that go back many, many years. So, but she said there's sightings all the time. And, you know, they think most of them are probably black bears or something else that people, you know, think are a Bigfoot, but they haven't actually caught one yet. And I think that's why in my mind, Bigfoot's probably the least likely of the cryptids to actually exist, because if it did, we would have found better proof by now. You know, they did They did a test out in, this is one of my Google holes that I went down, and I think I included this in the book, actually. Out in Washington State, which is kind of considered the beginnings of Bigfoot rumors in this country. There were some Washington State University people who did an experiment, and they created this giant mud puddle someplace where there'd been sightings, and they put fruit in it, and they just waited to see what would happen. I think they did this back in the 90s, so I don't know why they didn't have a camera set up, but anyway, when they came back after, I can't remember, it was the first day, second day, whatever, but they found an imprint of some animal that had sat or laid down somewhere in this mud, and they were convinced that, oh yeah, this is a Bigfoot, and it had eaten the fruit. And somebody else looked at it and said, looks to me like an elk that maybe laid down. And so they weren't convinced, but they found hairs in the mud. And they took these hairs and they had them all analyzed, and some of them were bear. I think there was some wolf, but there was one hair in there that was simian in nature. Simian meaning ape-like. So they had no idea where that one came from. So who knows? Maybe there's caves somewhere and they do. Maybe there's an alternate universe with some weird little doorway that, they can come and go. Who knows?
Only under a full moon.
Or a few drinks after a few drinks.
Well, there you go.
Any other questions? Oh, come on, questions about writing, questions? Yes. I've always been a writer. I think most writers have the same kind of story. I mean, yeah, as a kid, I was that annoying student in the classroom when the teacher assigned an essay. I was like, yes. And everybody else was groaning. I had a diary when I was very young, but I had 3 younger sisters also. So I had to give that up pretty quick because they found out where I hid it, learned how to pick the lock, and then showed it to my mother. So I had to quit doing the diary. I actually sent my first short story off when I was 17 years old to Highlights magazine. And they sent me back a rejection within 6 days. And that was back in the days of snail mail. So yeah. So when was your first writing, when you knew you were going to be a writer?
I used to sit at the kitchen table and I was like 6, and all I could do was print, and I would just print out little stories on this lined sheet of paper. And when I was like 13, I sent ideas to Rod Serling for, for Twilight Zone because I used to love to watch it. And I got back a very nice letter with my envelope mailed to him, not open, saying they do not accept unsolicited material. It's my first introduction to unsolicited material, because if by chance this 13-year-old, geeky genius here had come up with an idea and they used it or in any format, I could have sued them. So they were not going to look at anything that came in from it. They didn't know I was 13. Anyway, I was crushed because I thought I had a brilliant idea. I don't remember what it was now, but I sent them 2 ideas.
Well, the Twilight Zone, that's kind of in this
Yeah,
genre
yeah.
here
I used
then.
to- I used to love to watch stuff like
Maybe
that.
we should collaborate.
Yeah.
Yes, you had a question? It turns out that in the state of Washington, it's also not illegal to have a human body in your home, your store, or whatever. And this particular, there was actually on one of the reservations there was like a general store that had a mummified gentleman that was sort of their mascot. So I saw that years ago when I lived out in Washington, and it just kind of stuck with me. And when I was coming up with this idea for the odds and ends, I thought, God, I wonder if she could have a mummified person there too. So I started researching, can you have a dead body? And I know I'm on FBI watch list someplace because the stuff that I Google is just really scary. But anyway, I Googled whether or not you could legally have a dead body, and you can. And obviously mummified's better because you don't want it, rotting and smelling if you can, avoid that. So yeah.
Does it have to be like a certain age? Like the era of the pharaohs or something?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it all becomes a question of whether or not there's objections to it from family members or, other people with a vested interest in that particular person's body. And if there's, I mean, look at the bodies that they display in the museums now when they do the cutouts. You can have human bodies in places that kind of surprise you when you start looking into it a little bit.
I'm thinking Hitchcock here, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm glad to hear you like Henry. I had one person who emailed me who had read the book, Some Stranger, and she was very upset about Henry. She just thought that that was one of the meanest, cruelest things that anybody could do, and why would they do that? Which is why I made it pretty clear that Henry had no relatives that anybody knew of, and that he was lovingly cared for. So, yeah. Things happen to Henry in this book that are a little different, but he's still there. I'm not gonna give too much away, but well, that's the lifeblood of the cozy mystery, is actually the amateur detective. And I think that I think a lot of people are amateur detectives in a way. I've always loved puzzles, any kind of puzzle. I will do a puzzle. And I've always been intrigued by death and dying to some extent, which is why I did a stint in hospice. I worked 7 years in hospice and I loved it. If it hadn't been for the on-call time, I might have stuck with it. Um, there's a dog park that we go to most days near my house, and there's all these trails around it. And when I was walking one of the trails one day, and underneath a bunch of bushes and stuff, I saw something rounded and kind of white, but with brown on it, and it looked just like the top of a skull. And I got so excited. I was like, a body! I actually found a real body. And it turned out to be a big puff mushroom thing, so puffball mushroom. But for 1 second, my mind was immediately playing with, oh, what would I do first? Should I go look at it? Don't touch it. I got to call the police, but I want to go see what it is, and I was just going through all the possibilities. So I think there's just enough of, weird people out there like me. I don't think I'm all that unusual, maybe, but uh, I think there's a lot of amateur detectives in the world, people who want to get to the bottom of things and figure out what's really going on, especially in this day and age, because you can't believe half of what you see or hear, maybe more. So getting to the truth is getting to be a challenge.
Well, and you have a situation where people come to her, asking for help, and it's always a different. Well, there've been two, and then the third, we know what the third one is, and that's very different also.
Right.
So I think that adds to, she's not going out, she's not advertising, or like the guy who's the phony.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
mentioned in their hell,
Bauman,
whatever his name.
yes,
Yeah.
Hans Bauman.
And Bauman, who cheats people and all that sort of stuff. But she's legitimate, and people come to her to ask for help. So then she's just responding to a need.
Yeah,
And
she's
sometimes a
she's not your
crime.
typical just plain old nosy main character for mysteries, for cozy type mysteries, where I think it's, somebody who's an amateur detective, your ordinary everyday person who wants to stick their nose into a police investigation of some kind.
She's not Miss Marple.
In a little in a little town where people die at an amazing rate.
Yeah.
Like Jessica Fletcher. I would not want to live anywhere near that woman.
And questions, more, yes.
Process of coming up with foods, how you figure out this to, like how obvious it makes it. Like is there like a quote you have for like 5 foods for the main like bad guy, there's like 3 for the red herring or anything like that?
I don't really have a quote or anything, no, but I've learned to try to hide things in plain sight. If you give the reader enough interesting stuff as they're going along to focus on, you can hide something in there that they may not realize is significant. An example is one of the books that I wrote back when I was Beth Amos. I'm still Beth Amos, but when I was publishing under my real name, I had a very telling clue that basically solved the entire mystery, and it was buried in kind of a long narrative that somebody was reading from a medical chart. And that one little clue, I mean, the copy editor, and if any of you, you may not know this process, but when you work with a publisher, you turn your manuscript into an editor who does kind of a gross overview of the book and the plot and says, you know, this works, but that doesn't. And, you know, maybe you should tweak this a little and maybe the ending should have that, but they don't, you know, get down to line stuff. And once you get past that stage, then you get to the line stuff with the copy editors. And that's where you learn everything you don't know about grammar and sentence structure and all those other, and facts. My gosh, those people are really, I would not want to play Trivial Pursuit with a copy editor. But you never actually get to interact with your copy editor. You know, you just get it back after somebody else has sent it to them and their comments are in there, and you turn it back into your editor and the publishing staff. It doesn't even go back to the copy editor. But on that particular clue, that time, the copy editor actually wrote a note in there to me, to the author, and said, this is brilliant the way you hid this in here. And so that really kind of made my day, because you just normally don't hear anything from the copy editors that way. So I tend to do that a lot, I think, just hide those clues out, because you got to play fair with the reader. You can't just pull something out of thin air and at the end and say, and I've read books like that, it just makes you want to throw them across the room. It's really maddening. Death in Door County, a lot of people said, reminded them very much of a Scooby-Doo mystery. I have a lot of reviews that say this is like an adult Scooby-Doo, at least they said adult Scooby-Doo mystery. There was a dog. Yes, and the characters, I guess, could be kind of similar. So anyway, I've been on the fence about whether I should be flattered or insulted by that, but they all seem to enjoy it. So I guess I'm okay with it. You thought it too, didn't you? I could tell in the way you reacted to that. Yeah, yeah. One more quick question.
You mentioned earlier what's coming up. So how many books are you contracted for in this series right now? 'Cause obviously, you could go.
The first 2 books was a 2-book contract. They then contracted for only 1 more book. So right now I'm only contracted for just the Rhinelander one. Once I turn that in, whether or not they'll contract for another one will be decided, and that will be decided on how well this book sells people. Make a great Christmas present. I'm happy to sign it to anybody you want. So it'll all be based on sales. And it's really hard when you do a new series, because it takes a while for series to catch on. You know, with the Manny Winston books, when I was doing them, I was about book 4 or 5 when my editor there at Kensington, I was with Kensington then, said, I've always envisioned a mystery series that's kind of a Cheers setting. It takes place in a bar. And you just sort of have this secondary family of people that hang out at the bar. Can you give me a proposal for something like that? Would you be interested in writing it? And I said, sure. So I went ahead and set it in Milwaukee with a bar owner. I did some fun research coming to Milwaukee and visiting bars. And I gave the main character synesthesia, which is a neurological disorder where your senses get kind of cross-wired, and you experience every sense with another sense as well. That's a real thing. I know you're looking at me funny, but it's a real thing. And like musicians, a lot of musicians have synesthesia. When they hear music, they also see it as like colors or numbers or something like that. And that's how they know when it works. So her case of synesthesia is much worse than the average, and she actually uses it to help her solve crimes. And I forgot what the original question was now. I've gotten so sidetracked.
You answered how you were contracted.
Oh, yeah. Well, so they were saying, I was saying how hard it is to tell if a series is going to take off. The reason I had to come up with another pseudonym for that particular Milwaukee bar series was because they didn't know if the Maddie Winston series was going to succeed or not. I was right between book 4 and 5. And they said, if it doesn't take off, we don't want the new bar series to be impacted by Annelise Ryan's failure. And if the bar series doesn't take off, we don't want Annelise Ryan to be impacted by that failure. So we want you to come up with another new name, and we're gonna market that as a newly discovered author. That's what they did with both of them. So, it's kind of hard to tell when they're contracting for books, whether or not they're gonna, whether the series is gonna succeed. So the publishers, I think, are cautious sometimes about how many books they want to contract for. It's a cruel world. It is. This is the first time I've actually had only a one book contract in a long time. I've had, it's always been either 2 or 3 books at a time. So, and I've been through 3 publishers, 5 agents. It's a fickle business. So I learned never to expect anything and just be grateful for everything that happens.
And with that, I think we say
Thank you all
you.
for so much for coming.